Good morning. Thank you. My name is Annette Hauk, and I am the board president for Amethyst. Thank you for taking the time to join us for this Amethyst first annual report to the community. Amethyst started as the dream of a group of women who longed for a gender-specific, safe, and sober community where they could recover and heal. 26 years, and amazingly, more than 10,000 clients later, that dream is a reality. I now have the pleasure of introducing a close friend and colleague, the CEO of Amethyst, Ginny O'Keefe.
Good morning again. I'm so pleased to see so many friends and supporters here this morning. Thank you so much for joining us to celebrate the success we've had over the past year. The success of so many women and children who began their journey toward lifelong recovery, and for the success Amethyst has had in remaining a stable and viable organization. Earlier in September, I was invited to speak at the Adam Board Recovery Month kickoff. I was asked to address the need for and the value of continued advocacy and public policy that supports services for people seeking recovery for themselves and their families. It seems fitting to do it again. In fact, as soon as I finish these remarks, I'm leaving to participate in the Family Treatment Provider Coalition Forum in Washington, D.C., and I will be accompanied by an alum of Amethyst and a current client. They will participate in a leadership and advocacy training with women from 14 other states, help set policy agenda for 2011, and visit legislators to tell their stories, which reflect what a great return on investment treatment provides. When I started this journey 30 years ago, the face of treatment and addiction was different and yet in some ways the same. Addiction was declared a disease in the 1960s. Most hospitals had treatment programs. Halfway houses and residential treatment programs flourished. And there was an excitement as our field began to grow. There was also great hope that the stigma that kept people from accessing treatment and recovery would be eliminated. And yet today, we have fewer programs. Many of us are aging out. And we are not attracting young people to the field as a result of non-competitive wages, salaries, benefits, and unfortunately, stigma is still alive and well. So what can recovering people, impacted families, and concerned citizens do? We can reaffirm that recovery is possible. We must eliminate stigma by taking something that has been masked and hidden and see it as a cause for celebration as we're doing today. We must take a stand to build constituency groups that will speak in one voice for those who have none. We must continue to be that force that drives change. We must embrace and encourage young people to take up the mantle of public service. All of you in this room today are those who have become the force that continues to drive change. It is your support and courage that continues to call attention to this disease that decimates families and communities. Today, you will hear about some groundbreaking programs that are purely the result of your support and commitment to Amethyst and to helping us break the stigma of addiction, poverty, and violence. I am eternally grateful to all of you for your support, which has ensured that when people come to us for help, we can open the doors as well as our arms. And we know, as you do, that if we embrace them, they will embrace recovery, and all of our communities will be better for it. So enjoy your morning. I'm on my way to the airport. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Ginny. As pleased as Ginny and I are to speak about the importance of Amethyst and its mission, today I would like to invite community members and women who have experienced Amethyst's work firsthand to tell you about Amethyst's impact on the community. Our first speaker is a man who has rededicated his professional career to helping women reach their full potential and revive their lives. He created the CATCH program, which stands for Changing Actions to Change Habits. This new specialty court docket gives women who are arrested for prostitution the opportunity to get treatment for drug addiction and the underlying causes that led to their criminal behavior rather than be incarcerated. Amethyst is proud to partner with CATCH and accept CATCH women into our program. Please welcome Judge Paul Herbert, Franklin County Municipal Court Judge.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank you all for this prestigious invitation to be here this morning and for the wonderful food that you've provided. It's just a great place to be. These hallowed halls hold a very special meaning to me because 27 years ago, this September, I set foot on these grounds as a first-year law student at Capital University Law School. That's what this building used to be. I want to compliment you guys for the changes that you've made, and it certainly is much different than when I was a law student here. And back then, when I think 27 years ago, it's kind of nice to come full circle today and to be here, because 27 years ago, as a law student, I believe that my greatest goal in life was to earn more plaques than any of my other law students. But time has certainly changed that. Law school, I'm also here today to thank Amethyst and Jenny for being willing to partner with me on this journey, this experiment that we started to start a special, unique program for women who are particularly vulnerable. And I'd like to just share with you how that came to pass. The law can be good. The legal profession can be good. But in reality, I think if you ask most lawyers and judges, the law can beat you up too. It's a very contentious atmosphere where people argue all the time, every day, and people lie. And especially as a judge, you get to see that play out in our courtrooms. You get to see the horrible things that other people do on a daily basis to each other. And you really get an opportunity to witness the depravity of the human spirit at its darkest points. And so, quite frankly, that can have an effect on those of us who are in that profession. And I, probably about 4 years ago, was realizing that, hey, on the outside, I was able to still get good scores in the judicial rating polls, still maintain, the positive front and do what I had to do. But I realized that inside I was becoming colder and more distant and more protective of myself and more jaded of the people that came in front of me. And so I can remember the night I said a simple little prayer. I just said, God, I've got this amazing opportunity to be a judge. No one hardly ever gets that opportunity. It's such a blessing. But I know what's happening. And if there's any way that you could show me how to be more significant in my work, I would really appreciate that. Nothing happened immediately, but maybe 6 to 9 months later, I was in arraignment court. It's the worst place to be if you're a judge, because everyone that goes through arraignment court has been in jail. And it was a day after a holiday, and we had 36 domestic violence cases where women and the prosecution were asking for temporary protection orders against their significant other for beating them up and terrorizing them. And so we had all these hearings, and I kept seeing victims and defendants and victims and defendants, and it was a sea of misery, I'm not going to lie. And then the sheriff brings the next defendant out on the wall, and I look over, expecting to see defendant, and I see this woman. and she didn't look like a defendant to me. She actually looked like a victim, which kind of played with my mind since I had this protective, cookie cutter, let's get it done attitude. And I looked at her, and she was injured, and she had this lost look in her face, and she was ashen, and she was chained up. And I looked down at the file, and I see prostitute. And, I grew up in the culture of it's the world's oldest profession. There's nothing you're ever going to do to change it. It was here in the beginning, it's going to be here in the end, so don't even try to do anything. But what I didn't realize until later is that if she could have talked to me, she would have told me that she had a 62% chance of entering prostitution before she was 18 years old. And a 96% chance that she was a runaway. And she was running away from some very serious sexual abuse in her home and mental abuse. And that she didn't understand proper intimacy and the ability to when and how to say no because of all the abuse. And that she ran into somebody out there on the street that took advantage of that and got her hooked on drugs. She could have told me what the life is like out there for these women. Broken bones, head injuries, hospitalizations, unwanted pregnancies, losing your children to children's services. The life is horrific, and as a matter of fact, she could have told me that 15% of all people who commit suicide in the United States of America are prostitutes. And the average lifespan is 34 years old. She could have told me all that. I had to find that out later. Now, if you're bleeding heart like me, that's all you care about. But if you're a fiscal conservative and all you care about is economics, well, the cost of this individual to our society is enormous. What does it cost to hospitalize somebody for weeks on end because their face is crushed in? What does it cost to all the prenatal care and the birth and the legal costs of hiring the public defenders and the prosecutors and the police? And what are you getting? You're getting a revolving door. We saw year after year, all 8 years as a judge, is just revolving door. They're out, they're using, they're back. So I had this idea. And it was a crazy idea. I said, we got to do something about this. And I think if we give these folks some extra supervision, like a mental health court, we may be able to do something. So I went straight to the man that I always go first to on anything, and I'm so honored that he's here today. Judge James Graham has graced us with his presence today. And he's very special to me on many levels, and so I really appreciate you being here and sharing this moment with me today. Because if it wasn't for him and his encouragement, because I go to him with all my ideas, and he usually figures out a really nice way to tell me it's not a good idea. I think that's why I like him the most, is because he can tell me that I'm crazy without me knowing it. But this idea, he said, this is a good idea. You're onto something. So when I'm onto something, I'm onto it. You got to know that. And he introduced me to Bev DeLashment from Grace Haven. I don't think she's here this morning. Who then introduced me to Carol Harvey. Carol is right here. And Carol told me about Amethyst and, gender-specific, trauma-based, sober treatment for women. And so I was excited to get involved, or at least see where they could play a part in. And Judge Graham and Bev DeLashmus introduced me to Salvation Army, and Corsi, the Central Ohio Rescue Restore Coalition, is here today. Tricia and Christina and Stephanie. And so we sat down, I laid my vision out with Amethyst, first watch up here, around the table, and it was resounding absolutely, we want to partner with you. And then came the funding, which was very difficult, but Judge Vanderkar was able to secure our funding, and it wasn't through the City of Columbus, which is where our budget comes from. It's through Franklin County, and that's why I'm so happy to see Commissioner John O'Grady here today supporting Amethyst. John? Because if it wasn't for his leadership on our commission, we would never have been able to get the funding to provide for the staff, which is Andrea Boxel and Shaniqua Gator is here. And along the way, we've picked up an organization called DOMA, which comes alongside and takes care of the special needs, and Michaela Bream is here from DOMA. And we also have some really neat behind-the-scenes people that work every day. My bailiff, Amelia Stewart, is just tireless. We've got Marissa Akamini from the clerk's office and Dana Smith from the clerk's office. They both work in my courtroom, and they're very active. Also, Rick Pfeiffer jumped on board early on and said, let's get this done. So what I didn't realize that day, and I'm going to wrap it up here, since I know everybody's afraid of how long I'm going to talk. Where's Lauren? What I didn't realize, though, this has been the greatest thing for me, is I didn't realize how special that woman on the wall could be. I saw this woman who was a victim, and if she could tell me all the things that I mentioned, I believed it, but I didn't know, I didn't have a clue. I didn't have the first inkling of what this woman on the wall could become. And now, a year later, I do. This woman on the wall could become a Gina, who 2 weeks ago celebrated 365 days of sobriety with her mother and father crying at her side. She's an Amethyst client. Vivian, 21 months sober. She's the first experiment I tried. Vivian now has a valid driver's license and insurance, and she drives a van to pick up, the DOMA van, to pick up the girls and take them out to the house. She goes and visits the women who are waiting to go to Amethyst who are in jail. She knows how horrible that is because I put her in jail a lot. And she goes and takes them whites, and if she has any extra money, she takes that money and she puts it on their books so they'll have a little extra spending money. It's not about her. She also leads NA meetings in women's prisons. This is remarkable. This is the woman on the wall. This is what they're doing. How about Becky, 114 days sober? She made the statement to me that Amethyst and the Catch program is doing more for her than 13 years in prison ever did. And we laugh about this because Becky's our little zealot. Becky relapsed, and she was out on the west side, higher than a kite, but she referred 2 clients to Amethyst and the Catch program while she was out there. So we're real happy that Becky's back, and she is like a little ray of sunshine for us. How about Yvette, Amethyst? 323 days sober, and Cooper, 149 days sober. They organize the meals for all the brand new women in the Catch program that go to Amethyst. They give them a welcoming dinner, and they also are now trying to help us transition them from jail to Amethyst in a way so the women don't run. That's been our biggest problem, is from that jail, call the street, to Amethyst and all that boundaries there. And it's fun to listen to them plan the meals out. You know, we'd go to Kroger's or Giant Eagle and we'd get some filet mignon and we'd be able to grill it out. You know, they're talking about, well, I've got a couple of extra chicken breasts and you've got some rice-a-roni, and they're talking about putting this meal together. And it must be wonderful. I'm not going to tell any more stories, but you've got Jennifer, I'm not going to say last names, Jennifer at 105 days, Amethyst client. Barbara, 17 months, 1 week, Amethyst client. Rita Lynch, 266 days. Toya, 143 days. Vanessa, 11 months, 2 days. And Mona, 9 months. You know, you guys, I know why you guys are laughing. Mona's a character. But these are those ladies that are out there. This is what they can become. And this is why it's so important that you're here today and doing what you're doing. And I can't encourage you enough to continue to support the good cause of Amethyst, because what they're doing is they're creating these communities of special people that are growing and that are affecting the rest of the way Columbus, Ohio works. And I have to tell you, I'm a changed man because of this. There's a crack was opened up in my heart, and the light has shone in. And I think I'm starting to understand what true love is, because I think I feel it every day in that courtroom when they're all there. As a matter of fact, I added a probation condition onto their sentence that every time they're in the building, they have to come see Amelia and I. It's not for them, it's for us, right, Amelia? We feel better because they're around. That's how special they are, and that's what the great work that Amethyst is doing. So I want you to know that as a changed man, I'm now being more bold. I'm now stronger. I'm stronger in that I'm challenging other men in our community to protect the precious women and girls who are vulnerable. I'm challenging the Columbus Police Department. I'm challenging the city fathers and mothers. I'm challenging them because in a year or two we're going to have a casino in Columbus. And there are people right now trying to figure out how we're going to get enough girls and women in Columbus, Ohio. And so I'm challenging the laws that we have, that we enforce them, and that we can protect these women. So thank God that I'm here today and able to tell you this. It's my great pleasure. I talked to these folks from Women's Fund and said, I'm getting way more out of it than anyone else. So thank you for the honor of letting me speak and share this story with you today. I love Amethyst and what you're doing, and I look forward to sharing this story with any one of you more in detail afterwards. But thank you very much for letting me be here.
Thank you so much, Judge Herbert. Carol, I was sitting here thinking as I was listening to all this, you give us a monthly update at our board meetings, and I'm going to listen in a different way as you give us. So thank you so much. In 2009, the Women's Fund of Central Ohio was the inaugural founder of the Supported Employment Program at Amethyst. The Women's Fund is an organization whose mission is to transform the lives of women and girls by mobilizing the collective power and passion of all women working together. Please welcome Kelly Boudros, Director of Programs for the Women's Fund of Central Ohio.
Well, that's really hard to follow. I want to invite him back up. You can have my time. Come back up and speak. So you heard a little bit about the Women's Fund. We're a foundation for women and girls. In the end, the reason why the Women's Fund exists is because 7% of philanthropic dollars are spent on programs specifically for women and girls. So we exist because we want to even the playing field and make sure that the women and girls in our society are receiving the same opportunity to reach their potential as the men and boys in our society. We fund 3 priority areas: economic self-sufficiency, life skills for girls, and leadership for women. And we're a foundation that funds social change rather than direct service. And kind of the easy way that I think about the difference between direct service and social change is that when we tell this story at the Women's Fund, and you've probably heard it before, but there's a river and people are falling into the river and you're at the bottom of the river and you're pulling people out of the river to save them from drowning. That someone needs to continue to pull those folks out of the river. That's the shelters, the food banks, the emergency centers. That funding is important, but what the Women's Fund focuses on, what our priority areas are, is we kind of walk upriver and say, who's throwing these people in the river? How are these women getting into the river? What's happening? What systems and institutions are allowing this to continue to happen? And we fund programs that change those systems and institutions to keep those women from drowning. So Amethyst is, I have to admit, I'm just going to admit now that Amethyst is one of my favorite nonprofits. And I can say that because at the Women's Fund, staff don't make funding decisions. It's one of the ways where we democratize philanthropy. We have high school girls and women come together and read our grants, and they inform the board about what programs they feel are going to make the biggest social change impact for the girls and women in Central Ohio, and then the board makes that recommendation. So A, I can be a cheerleader for all the programs that come through, and B, I can have programs that I feel have a special place in my heart, and Amethyst is one of those. We funded a new pilot program, which is my favorite things about the Women's Fund, is we fund brand new seed programs, we fund great ideas, we fund grassroots organizations, and we fund large organizations. The supportive employment program for Amethyst was a seed program, was a brand new pilot project. It has the perfect trifecta of the three areas that we like to see programs to focus on with economic self-sufficiency. We want individual women to be served. We know that they need the support, the hard skills and the soft skills that they need to become employable. That was really important that Amethyst was providing that over a long period of time, 6 months of programming, to provide the women to get updated. You know, it's hard for us to stay current with, you know, that goes from Windows 2003 to 2007, and we're, you know, shocked. What happens when you haven't really worked on a computer ever in your whole life, or you haven't worked on a computer in 5 years? So getting those hard and soft skills up are really important. Secondly, what Amethyst did was they went to employers, and they said to employers, we want to talk to you about hiring women in recovery. We want to talk to you about the benefits of hiring women in recovery who have support once they are employed to remain employed, and that we'll be partners with you in helping you hire these women. We'll be partners with you in keeping them employed. So when you think about that, it not only helps women who are going through Amethyst's program, but it helps employers reduce the stigma of what it means to hire someone who's in recovery. And it changes their mind about anyone who might come through their doors who has a gap in their resume, and that person says, this wasn't a particularly proud time in my life. I had issues with addiction. I have been in recovery for X number of years, and I'm committed to becoming employed and remaining employed. That's social change in our mind. So Amethyst isn't just impacting the individual women who are going through their program, but they're really changing and shifting the definition of women in recovery in the greater Columbus area. Then the third thing, finally, what they do is they work with judges to rescind nonviolent drug offenses, which is huge. If you, not only have a gap in your resume, but then you have to report that you've been arrested and what you've been arrested for, that's a lot to explain to an employer. Why would they risk hiring you when they could hire someone without a record with no gap in employment? So if you can get those nonviolent drug offenses rescinded earlier and rescinded faster, then that is one less barrier to employment for these women who are in recovery. So I'm going to preach a little bit about what that means for the economy, because I think it's really important that we talk about women as economic engines in our society. And recently we've heard a lot about the man session, right? That in this economic downturn, men are disproportionately being left out of work or having to leave work. And women now comprise the majority of the workforce. Well, that's really not the whole story. That's what you hear in the newspaper, but that's not the whole story. The real story is that, yes, men are losing their jobs, and now there are more women who are supporting their families. But these women are supporting their families on 77 cents to a man's dollar if they are equally employed. But the majority of women in the workforce work part-time, and they work part-time without benefits. So when we're relying on women in our society to support our families, these women don't have family-sustaining wages. So in a time when we talk about getting men back to work and workforce development programs and high-wage jobs, women are being left out of that equation. So workforce development programs, for example, don't provide things like child care or transportation, things that are particularly barriers for women to become employed. That's what Amethyst does. Amethyst helps women in recovery who are looking for employment find those resources to reduce those barriers to employment. So what does that mean? Well, there's a lot of research being done about women in the workforce now and about women as economic engines, not only within the United States, but also globally. The United Nations has shown research now that shows that if you're going to invest in a country, if you're going to invest in a workforce, the single most best investment you can make is in the women and girls in that society. that when a woman is employed, they not only support themselves, but they support their families and their extended families. That if you want to invest in economic recovery, the investment is in women and girls. So what does this mean for Amethyst and their supportive employment program? Amethyst has built trust and a relationship with the clients in their care. And so what they do is they help those women become confident to become employed. Once they become employed, they provide stability for them and help with retention and keeping them employed. And then that changes employers' minds about what it means to hire women in recovery. That's shifting the view and redefining what it means for women in recovery to become employable. So one of the things I think about is what employability means and how really kind of complicated it is. So becoming employed now in the marketplace is challenging. If you've aged out of the young professional population like I have, you have ageism. You could potentially face sexism. Your skill set could be behind. You could not be up to date on the latest technology within your industry, which makes you kind of a dinosaur. So imagine now that you have a gap in your resume anywhere from 2 to 10 years. Imagine that you may not have a resume that you can say other than maybe the work that you did when you were locked up. So you need these hard skills and you need these soft skills. How do you get along in the workplace? How do you move from poverty to middle class and function well within that new culture that you're moving into? But imagine then you have to be well-dressed and presentable and well-spoken. And you have to be a driver and move things forward, but you also have to build collaboration. It's complicated to remain employed, and I think that under those circumstances, in some ways it's hard for almost anyone in this audience to remain employed some days, right? Some days you're thinking, I just don't have what it takes to stay in this very complicated work dynamic. These women have to do it with much more barriers than that. So from the Women's Fund perspective, Amethyst is providing exactly what we're looking for. We want to fund those programs that are gender specific. We want to fund programs that not only help the individual woman, but move society forward in a way that changes the definition. We're a proud funder of Amethyst. They're in our grant cycle now. We'll cross our fingers. And I want to just personally thank you for doing the work that you're doing. I think that it is so important, and you do it not the easy way, you do it in the hard way and in the best way. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Thanks to funding from sources such as the Women's Fund, the supported employment program at Amethyst has already had considerable success. 72 women are currently being served by the program, and 48% of those are currently pursuing education programs. Despite the hard work of Amethyst, the women, and the staff, the program could not be successful without employers who are hiring our women. It is a challenge to find employers who can look past the socioeconomic concerns and other challenges our clients face. I now invite Sue Wolford, volunteer coordinator for the Columbus Metropolitan Library, to speak about her experience in hiring Amethyst clients as volunteers at the library.
And to follow Amethyst and the Women's Fund, can't beat that. The first thing you'll notice when you talk to an Amethyst participant is attitude. They're happy, positive, willing to do whatever you ask of them. Every person I've interviewed from Amethyst has demonstrated this. So far, Columbus Metropolitan Library has had 3 volunteers from Amethyst, and I'm going to tell you the story of our first volunteer, Michelle. She dropped by the library one summer afternoon to see if it was possible to volunteer with us. She knew the library as a refuge when she was growing up. Michelle loved the library and knew that that was where she wanted to give back. After talking to her for about 10 minutes in the lobby, I wanted to find a place for her. We ran her background check, and I found it wasn't pristine. I debated whether or not to take her on. But as I considered her, I remembered how grateful Michelle was. She was grateful to get on the other side of this disease, grateful that someone would consider her for unpaid employment, and she seemed grateful to be happy and alive. Did I want this person volunteering with us? Yes, I did. Every time I went down to her work area, she stopped me to tell me how happy she was volunteering, and she thanked me. Her supervisor loved her, and she loved that Michelle's attitude was catching. When she would come into work, suddenly everyone's attitude was a little more positive, a little more happy, and she was doing great at her job. For 4 months, Michelle decided she wanted to stay with us. So she applied for that first job. Someone with more work experience got it, so she talked to her supervisor to find out what she had to do to make that leap. Her supervisor coached her, encouraged her to build her skills, and keep trying. She was as determined as Michelle to get her into the system. So the next job came along, and it went to someone else. And the third try was finally the charm that did it. The hiring supervisor saw in Michelle what I saw. Here was someone determined to do a great job for us. 6 months after she started volunteering with us, she was an employee. Once she started working with us at a different location, she kept in touch. Every time we had a special event where Michelle could do something extra, she volunteered again. If you ever attended the library's Celebration of Learning, our big fundraiser, chances are Michelle checked your coat. If you brought a child to our summer reading club kickoff, you saw Michelle lead her son, dressed as Winnie the Pooh, to greet children at Main Library. This past February, Michelle left to go home to Cleveland to take care of an ailing mother. Before she left, she told me, she said, "Don't worry, I'll be back." She came back to us again this summer for the kickoff for Summer Reading Club, and she'll be with us when we start knocking on doors to support Issue 4. Michelle knows how important this is to the library, and she'll be in Columbus on weekends to help us out. Will I take a chance on another Amethyst volunteer? You bet I will. And if we have the right work and the right skill set in a person, I'll be happy to make that match. I don't look at this as a chance on taking a chance on someone. From my experience, working with Amethyst, it's a sure bet. Thank you.
I was hoping you'd get a little plug in there for Issue 4. So. Thank you so much. At Amethyst, we believe that the only way to break the cycle of addiction, violence, and poverty is to focus on both the mother and the child. Currently, 63 children live with their mothers in Amethyst housing. The majority of these children attend Summer Quest, which is Amethyst's nationally acclaimed summer day camp. This 12-week intense and intervention day camp fosters healing and emotional growth. In 2008, the Amethyst contracted an independent researcher to evaluate the outcome of the Summer Quest program. Based on the comprehensive evaluation received, Amethyst was able to put changes and improvements in place for the 2009 program. Please welcome Dr. Melissa Beers of the Strategic Research Group to discuss the Summer Quest program.
Good morning. Thanks. You'll have to forgive me, I'm a college teacher, so I have to have visual aids. But I'm very proud to be here today to talk with you a little bit about Summer Quest. I've been involved with Summer Quest now. This is the second year that Strategic Research Group has been involved to assist with the evaluation of this program. It's a remarkable program. I want to tell you a little bit about it today. It's a 12-week program over the summer, a very intensive intervention with children. And you might ask yourself, why would an organization interested in helping women recover from drug and alcohol addiction be doing a summer camp? Well, it makes absolute perfect sense because you also have to think about the children. We've heard a lot about the women, the challenges that the women at Amethyst faced and overcome, but they also bring with them children that have their own unique challenges. So this is a camp designed for those children, for school-age kids, coming from very challenging backgrounds. In a very short time, they've experienced a lot of very complicated kinds of situations, a lot of trauma, history of, it's staggering when you hear about what some of these children have been through. But Bringing mom on board with Amethyst, getting mom involved in treatment, certainly addresses one big risk factor that these kids face. But there are others, and if the goal is to break the cycle of addiction, then Summer Quest can help in many ways. Intervening with mom and intervening with children helps to build a ramp for these kids. We can't guarantee what the outcome will be for these kids down the road, but I like to think of Summer Quest as building a ramp to change the trajectory of their lives, one step at a time. And over the 12 weeks of Summer Quest, and for some kids over multiple years that they attend Summer Quest, they're building a ramp to set these children on a different path. The camp started in 1998, and it was really quite a remarkable endeavor. It meets all the standards that any summer camp would have in terms of ODJFS standards. And the main goal was, what happens to these kids during the summer? Mom's in treatment, kids are out of school. What do we do? There wasn't really, in 1998, there wasn't really a good fit. One camp, one service that really addressed all the needs these kids have. So this camp, designed with the needs of these children in mind, not only helps keep mom in recovery, but it also provides very unique, very supportive services designed specifically for them. And again, the goal is to break the cycle of addiction, homelessness, and poverty. It's also very, very interesting that when you ask moms about when they first started using, it's very young, often as young as 10 or 11 years old. That's the age where Summer Quest is starting to reach the children at Amethyst. These are the kids that are vulnerable. This is a time in their life when they could go down a different path. But it's a very important time in their lives when Summer Quest can intervene. This is just a model, a visual diagram that represents conceptually what Summer Quest tries to achieve. It's got two main goals. One is to address those risk factors that make kids vulnerable for addiction later in their own lives. And one is to build protective factors to help them develop the skills that they will need to be able to resist drugs and alcohol and to change the trajectory of their lives. And so how does Summer Quest do this? Well, first, it keeps moms in treatment. So moms stay in treatment while kids go to camp. It also helps in terms of parenting skills. When you think about the fact that a lot of these women unfortunately grew up in households that had a lot of challenges, that they started using drugs and alcohol very early in their own life, where did we learn our parenting skills? Often we learn them from our parents, right? So, it's a good time to reinforce, to shore up, to help and support parenting. Everyone can use help with their parenting, right? So it's a good opportunity to help build parenting skills in mom, build communication skills in mom, and also help kids understand addiction a little bit better, using resources from the Children's Program Kit, from Children of Alcoholics, also Celebrating Families, a curriculum that they're using now. So they use curriculum specifically designed for the needs of families recovering from drug and alcohol addiction. And also enhancing those protective factors with the kids. So building communication skills, building conflict resolution skills, helping kids understand how they can resolve conflict peacefully and effectively, helping them to feel safe and secure, giving them something fun to do over the summer, helping them feel, again, part of that community of recovery, and helping them make healthy choices themselves. And it is an award-winning program. My experience with Amethyst has allowed us to really look at the program, look at the various components of the program, and again, it effectively capitalizes on a number of very important partnerships with the Buckeye Ranch, with the City of Columbus, to provide partners that can bring special resources to the table that can really help these kids. And so, as a result of their efforts, they won the Center for Substance Abuse Prevention's Service to Science Award. As a result of their evaluation efforts, they won an Outstanding Program Award, an Exemplary Program Award from the National and I never can remember that acronym, but it's the National and National Association of State Directors, Substance Abuse Directors, thank you. But they've been recognized for their accomplishments in this regard. So it's been an honor to work with them. They make remarkable achievements in not only the lives of the children, but in the family as a whole, and very wisely support not only mom's recovery, but the recovery of the family. So, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Beers. It's been a true pleasure to hear so many viewpoints today. We've heard from our funders, evaluators, and employers. It is now my pleasure to welcome a true expert on Amethyst, someone whose life and whose children's lives are directly affected by the program every day. Please welcome Kanika, an Amethyst client.
Good morning. My name is Kanika, and I've been a client at Amethyst for over 2 years. I grew up in a small town about an hour from here, the oldest of 2 girls.
I know, this is what you want, right?
My father, who I hardly knew, played a limited role in my life. My mother worked 2 and sometimes 3 jobs to provide for my sister and myself. My mother was also addicted to drugs and was physically abused by my father. For me, this meant I had to look out for my sister and my mother and take on a parenting role when I was very young. I grew resentful and felt unimportant as I cared for everyone else and not enough for myself. I was in high school and I first started smoking marijuana and cigarettes. The time went on as I had my children, and men continued to enter my life who were emotionally and physically abusive. I eventually found myself doing harder drugs. Excuse me. I used the drugs to escape the pain of what was going on in my life, and I unknowingly got caught up in the same cycle of abuse and addiction I had grown up in. I never saw an example of healthy parenting and living, so I was repeating the same mistakes. For 7 years, I continued down this path. My self-esteem was non-existent. My drug abuse was growing worse. I found myself suffering from addiction, homelessness, unable to keep a job, and raising my children alone. I eventually found myself living with my parents again, who had remarried, joined a church, and started rebuilding their lives. It was my mother's insistence that had pushed me toward Amethyst. I didn't know it at the time, but this decision would change my life. After I got an apartment with Amethyst, all of my children came to live with me. It's a very frustrating and emotionally draining process. I didn't know my children, and they didn't know their own mother sober. My oldest daughter was skeptical and angry, and my oldest son wanted nothing to do with me. The family team at Amethyst helped me to obtain a referral for my daughter, and she was able to receive the counseling she needed. My son was skipping classes, smoking cigars, and being disrespectful to teachers. A family team counselor was instrumental in helping me find and use new parenting tools to deal with this situation. I may not have had an example of good parenting when I was a child, but I could decide to be the change and break this cycle for my children. Several instances have come up over the past couple of years with my children, and I have not hesitated to seek assistance from the family team. With the busy treatment schedule, volunteering, and AA meetings, SummerQuest is a huge help this summer. Not only is it a safe environment for my children, my youngest two really love going to camp. They're learning things about themselves as individuals, my disease, and improving social skills. They have formed lifelong bonds with other children and have learned to express themselves. They may not be perfect angels, but they are, however, becoming well-rounded, expressive, and happy children. They look forward to going to camp every year, whether it is for the field trips, to see their favorite counselor, or to get ready for the year-end SummerQuest talent show. I've been clean and sober for 2 years, moved up successfully through different levels at Amethyst, and started college at Columbus State University last week. my counselor, my case manager, the family team, and the Summer Quest staff have all been instrumental in my being able to achieve these things. Most importantly, they have helped me give my children a real chance at improving their lives and breaking the cycle that has affected our family so deeply. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Kanika, for sharing your story with us. To conclude our presentation, I'd like to introduce Lori Chris, Amethyst's Chief Operating Officer.
Thanks, Annette. Good morning again, everyone. Well, from this morning's program, you can tell that 2009 was a pretty tremendous year for Amethyst. And we know that we're abundantly blessed to have such success as a result of the work of our staff and board, especially during these economically difficult times. We've made sound decisions that have reduced expenses and created a stable foundation for us to meet the growing demand for our needs in Columbus right now. At a time when many programs are being cut and wait lists are lengthening, Amethyst is in a solid position to more openly widen our doors for women and children to enter into our program. So far in 2010, we've expanded our integrated treatment and housing program by 35 units. We've doubled the treatment capacity in our non-residential program, STAR. We've trained staff and implemented new evidence-based programs, including supported employment, celebrating families, and therapeutic community. And just this month, we learned that we received a 5-year grant from the Substance Abuse Mental Health Administration to expand and enhance our services for women in our sober housing and communities of recovery. We know that our success is not ours alone. It's possible because we have strong partnerships in the community, like the partners we shared today, and quality programs and organizations with whom we can collaborate. But it's also possible because of the courage and strength and the trust that women such as Kanika give each of us every day at Amethyst so that we have the ability to do the work set before us. We also appreciate your participation today and the efforts that you make to be ambassadors on our behalf. Taking the time to learn of our successes strengthens your ability to share our message in the community. Every time you talk about the value of Amethyst in our community, you further the message that addiction is a disease, that treatment is health care, and that safe and sober housing is a necessary recovery support. You fight the stigma, you share the message of recovery, you elevate the importance of our work, and you make resources for our work possible. So thank you for your opportunities that you provide to us through that ambassadorship. I ask you to commit today to sharing what you've learned this morning with 5 other people in your day today, whether it's at work, in your neighborhood, in your family. And in doing so, you will expand the message of this morning to an additional 400 people. And that would be a tremendous way to start the day and to celebrate September, which is Recovery Month. So again, our accomplishments are not ours alone. And thank you for partnering with us to continue in this legacy of success.
Thank you, Lori, and thank you to everyone who shared their stories and information with us today. Judge Herbert, Kelly, Sue, Dr. Beers, and Kanika. I would also like to thank 3 committee members who were instrumental in putting together the program this morning. I don't know if they're here, but if they are, I'd love for them to raise their hand so we can acknowledge them. They're not here, none of them? Oh, bummer. All right, well, let me give you their names anyways. Stacia Koch, Megan McKay, and Quatina Sims all helped in putting this program together, and I know it was very much appreciated. One book or administrative thing, we all need to return our badges, so please make sure that you do that on your way out. Community support is paramount to continuing the work of Amethyst as we strive to empower women and their families through a community of recovery. You will each find before you a copy of Amethyst's 2009 annual